Allow me to begin first with the bad news. I think that all across the board we tend to get it backwards in our relationships. I think this is true whether or not you're a Christian, but I do wish that Christians, as part of their gospel, would get this right. Without this, if there is gospel, the joy and fruitfulness of it will be short-lived. What I'm talking about are the two fundamental purposes for having a relationship. My claim is that in our most important relationships, any relationship that we would describe as personal in any way, it's vital that we stay mindful of how and in what priority these purposes are being served within the relationship. Often, both purposes should be fulfilled. But it's dangerously easy to let the second one become the dominant one over the first. So, let me ask this question. Now, some of you are going to know the answer, and others are going to think you know the answer. Here it is. What was the first thing wrong in the Garden of Eden? Who are we going to blame? It wasn't Eve. It wasn't her reaching for the fruit. It wasn't Adam, something he did. It was God who first noticed something's wrong here. It's not good for man to be alone. That was before the fall. That was before the sin. And so after a long, one more day of work for Adam, of observing the animals and naming them, probably noticing that they tended to move around in pairs or small groups, at the end of that particular day, God put Adam to sleep and created for him a beautiful companion. Lest you believe that God's purpose was primarily to get more help for the work of the garden. That's not how Adam experienced it when he woke up and said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." He never even mentions that it will only take half as long to get the work done now. He has finally found things are set right for the first time in the Garden of Eden when he has a companion. And it's for this cause that a man will leave his father and mother and be united and become one flesh. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them and blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea," and so on. And now we see the two purposes of relationship in their best order. Number one, it's not good for man to be alone. So the first purpose of relationship is companionship. And the second purpose of relationship is dominion. Be fruitful, increase, fill, subdue, rule. Too often, we get these purposes backwards. We forget the first reason that we were given to each other. And I don't mean just marriages, us to each other. Allow me to speak in a stereotype for a moment. But in marriage counseling, it's often a woman who complains of a frustrated aloneness because she wants to talk about what's going on in her life, including its frustrations. And the husband too often responds with, "Well, have you tried this? And, well, did you talk to so-and-so? What about trying this? And try out." And it's just frustrating because often she has tried this or that to no avail. And will go back at it again tomorrow. But tonight, just for tonight, she just wants to be heard. She just wants her husband to listen and be with. She doesn't want to spend one more ounce of energy trying to take dominion over the challenge. And it's a wise man who does not automatically try to fix, but indulges his compassion and love for her and does nothing more than say, "I'm sorry it hurts. Can I have your hand? May I hold you?" Or "Thank you just for sharing this." We Christians, we're notorious for talking about reasons we want to get married. We'll say things like, "I think we can do more together for God if we're married," as if the relationship is justified primarily by how much more work we'll get done. Your heart knows its primary reason for relating is not in order to get more work done. It's companionship. So what does this have to do with us and the annual Cup of Cold Water Missions Banquet? Cup of Cold Water Ministries is a mission and sending agency. It recruits, it helps prepare, and it sends missionaries to serve in a variety of ways around the world. It's a mission agency like so many other mission sending agencies in the world. Did you hear that? It's a mission agency. Think about that word, mission. Of the two purposes of relating, companionship and dominion, which purpose is most suggested by the word mission? By our very name, by our very DNA, in a sense, we are formed, in this particular case, for dominion. And so for years, Cup of Cold Water has been helping to advance the kingdom of God around the world by preaching the gospel and aiding the poor. In the very beginning, as you saw, it was customizing BWs to help poor Bolivian farmers to get produce from their gardens to the market. Some of our missionaries educate children, others care for orphans, churches are planted. Great dominion has been exercised by Cup of Cold Water over the years. But in the last several years, there's been a growing understanding in Dan and the members of the board of Cup of Cold Water that it's not okay to overemphasize the work of the mission to the neglect of the mission. That's another way of saying that it's not okay to make dominion more important than companionship in this process. And so they began to talk together and to reach out to some of their missionaries in new ways that don't just ask for a progress report, but take account of how the missionary's heart is doing, or their marriage, their children. Money has begun to be spent, not just on strategies, but on care. And I celebrate this move. The course of my own life has allowed me the privilege of hearing not just the conquests of missionaries, but of their internal life, their fears, their great pains and failures, their disillusionment that comes, and the sense of disconnection even from their senders and supporters. I've learned that before missionaries are workers, they're people. Missionaries are not sent from God because they're superior human beings. Sorry, missionaries. And it's not good for them if we assume that they are, and that they don't have the same needs and vulnerabilities that we do. Just like behind the choices that we make, there are a host of reasons that people become missionaries. I'm sure it's no coincidence that a young missionary I met just over a year ago lives exactly 12 time zones from the father who abandoned her. I'm also sure that she's bearing much fruit and is called of God. Consider the dilemma of this missionary. I had the privilege in Sao Paulo of sitting down with a missionary who within the prior year had returned to Brazil after a furlough in the United States. Upon return, he learned that a major leader that he had discipled had decided to take the church for himself. And a once large and flourishing church that he had planted was now split and greatly reduced. What was he going to tell his supporters? What did it say about the effectiveness of his choice of a leader or of his discipleship of him? Would his agency and his supporters continue to believe in him enough to continue their support? Should he even believe in himself? After all, he was missionary, and aren't church planting missionaries supposed to be able to plant at least one church successfully? My privilege with him was not to try to strategize a better way going forward, to either recapture what was lost or to be more effective in the future. It was just to be with, to grieve with. And in the grieving, I shared an observation with him. In his story, I noticed that the circumstances he found himself in with this leadership team seemed to me very reminiscent of the circumstances of the greatest missionary who ever lived, Jesus. Near the end of Jesus' first term, his crowds had been reduced from 5,000 or so to about 12, and one of them was a betrayer. He knew it too, that the others were just about to deny him and scatter. What should Jesus do? Should he get all self-absorbed about what all this says about his abilities and his work for the last 3.5 years? Should he regroup and re-strategize and give it one more shot to show himself and them that he still had it in him? We know what Jesus did. He had a meal prepared, and one of the first things he said to his guests was, I'm not any longer going to be calling you servants. You're friends. You're companions. Jesus, at his most mature, was not going to do one more spectacular event. He was going to care for his friends, feed them, reassure them, wash their feet. And when he got up on that table, knowing what he was about to face, his request to his friends was not that they help him figure out how to help him get out of this. It was, could you just pray with me for 1 hour? Jesus, the ultimate apostle, the ultimate missionary, at his most mature, looked like a failure and just craved to be with. Companionship. And in that experience, we see that companionship actually effects dominion. It is no accident that the King of Kings' name is Emmanuel, God with us. It is no accident that all the names of God in the Old Testament are about all the things that God would do for us. He's the one who fights for us, the one who becomes our righteousness, the one who heals for us. But at its peak, the most mature, it's God with us. Companion. My Brazilian missionary friend took great comfort in identifying himself and his circumstances with the very life of the one he loved and aimed to serve. He took great comfort in experiencing himself as a friend of Jesus and not just a servant with a failed, quote-unquote, failed church plan. He was reassured when we remembered that there is no path to Christ-likeness that does not include grief. For our Lord was known as a man of sorrows, well acquainted with grief. Where is the safe place for the missionary's heart? And not just the mission. Last year, our congregation had the privilege of providing an extended space of rest and healing for a long-term missionary. She was not only exhausted when she arrived, she was having nightmares as a symptom of the post-traumatic stress that she was suffering from. There had been too many threats to her and her family's life. The bullet holes in their village house were a constant reminder that you never know when. But her denomination didn't know. Her supporters didn't know. She'd been advised not to dwell on the negative because it could make her ministry look bad or demotivate some who were supporters. Letters to supporters needed to emphasize success and results, spiritual dividends for their dollars of giving. She had a personal dilemma too. When she was young, she'd radically given her life to a good and loving Jesus. She used her college years to learn the language of some of the most lost people in the world who've been denied the gospel behind the Iron Curtain. So it was with a full heart she joined her husband to go to an even darker part of the world to declare the spectacular news. And with great help of the Spirit, after 10 hard years of planting, they began to reap great harvest. But at great personal cost. Questions began to haunt. If God is so good, and I gave him so much of myself, why does my husband constantly get death threats? Why do I have to live in terror that rebels may again attack and my children be harmed and killed while I watch helplessly? If this is the Jesus life, is it really a good life? Would you really want someone you cared about to sign up for it? And her heart began to dull and get empty. The Bible she once loved began to be an occasion for personal condemnation, and so it got neglected, and she thought she shouldn't tell anyone. How in the world could a missionary tell that the news inside isn't so good? In Ottawa last year, she found herself surrounded by a group of people who weren't her financial supporters. They didn't want to hear about results. They wanted to know her heart. They wanted to be with her. And so they gathered and listened to the laments that she felt guilty about writing. Listen to this very edited version of some of her laments. Why, God, did you not prepare me for the terror I have experienced? Why would you do miracles all around me and yet withhold your power to heal me? My heart feels walked on, stomped on. I feel suffocated even as I write this. I can't breathe. Do you care? Why so? When there's 5 O's. Why so long without even a drop of comfort? I need you to help me. My attitude is not great because I'm tired of this race. Do you have something else for me? I know you don't give a rock when your child asks for bread, so could you please explain what happened? I don't want any quick formulas or wise sayings. Listen to this. How about a hug? Here's an interesting one. What were you thinking when you put a rose next to a banana tree? She needed to explain that one to me, so I interrupted her. In her particular culture, which she would describe as very ugly, not a lot of appreciation for beauty, at least as we understand it. Anything that lives and grows is used primarily for food or for tool or whatever. There's nothing that grows there just to look at and be beautiful. And she found herself in this culture, and so if there's a banana tree in the yard, and if there's a rose bush in the garden, the rose bush is nothing. We need the bananas from the tree. And she found herself in this culture wanting to feel like a rose to somebody, at least maybe the God that sent her, and instead stripped and used, expended by the people around her. Continuing, so many sleepless nights. How does that glorify you? Please send this hell to hell. Yes, bring your love to these people, but at what cost to my children? Laments of a missionary, needing companionship, not just a new strategy for going forward. Let me move towards the good news. When missionaries find that there is a place where they're not only being asked to take dominion in the field, but someone reaches out to demonstrate companionship, big changes do begin to happen. The missionary that I just mentioned to you has returned to that field, and reports from her and her husband report significant progress and a greater willingness on their part to tell the bad news. This last Christmas, I received an e-card from a missionary I met in the Netherlands. Throughout his entire life, let alone his ministry, he carried a dark and shameful secret that not even his wife knew. Something in the conversation we had triggered that, maybe for the first time in my life, there might be a safe place to share this, to tell this secret. And finally, in that atmosphere of companionship, he was able to tell. His Christmas card contained pictures of a happy wife and happy children, and the words, "Hello, John. Thank you for your ministry. I explained to my wife the experience I had in my childhood. I keep unlocking and healing wounds." A big hug. So on a personal level, let me say on behalf of thousands of missionaries, what a blessing it is to hear that your ministry, that cup of cold water, is growing in your commitment, not just to the mission, not just to dominion, but to the missionary, to companionship along the way. It is not good for any man, for any woman, to be alone. And allow me to read a paraphrased verse of our theme verses for tonight. I'm reading, starting just a little bit before what you might see on your card. I'm paraphrasing the first paragraph. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that you have renewed your concern not just for the mission, but for missionaries. In Indeed, you've always been concerned, but you've not always known how or where to show it. I'm not speaking up on behalf of missionaries primarily for their practical needs, because typically they think we've got way too much anyway, and they've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. They know what it's like to be in that kind of need, and they know what it's like to have plenty. Most have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. They do this all. They've learned to do this all through Him who gives them strength. And now I'm not paraphrasing, I'm quoting Paul. Yet it was kind of you, listen to this, to share my trouble. Paul is rejoicing that he doesn't just have to send a success report. It's a kindness of you that we share in trouble. And you Philippians yourselves know that in the beginning of the gospel, when I left Macedonia, no church entered into partnership with me, and that one has kind of a double meaning. That could be partnership in dominion, but that can be partnership in companionship, and it kind of bleeds over there. No church entered into partnership with me in giving and receiving except you only. Even in Thessalonica, you sent me help for my needs, plural, once and again. Please know, the most important need that we will ever help be fulfilled in a missionary is not money, though don't stop sending money. That arouses other needs. So friends, board members of Cup of Cold Water, Dan, Marcy, others, thank you so much for your support, not just of the mission, but of the missionaries. Your financial support to the missionaries means much, and I would want nothing that I say to diminish the importance of that. And in fact, I would wish that even when our economy struggles here, let's not let the sneeze here become a flu there. Let's do our best to prioritize and keep stabilizing their situation. They're in deeper trouble than we are if they lose their support. All I would ask is that we rethink what our expectations are of missionaries. Above all, that we remember that they need companionship even more than they need help with dominion. Make sure they know you love their good reports, but that it would be quite all right, and their support is not at risk just because the report may not be so good. Can you imagine the Lord trying to send out a supporter letter right before or after the Last Supper? For those of you who have personal connections with the missionaries, your companionship and care role is even more vital than your financial role. Make safe places for your friends to be honest about their work and, more importantly, the journey of their own heart. So again, to Dan, board members of Cup of Cold Water, a loud thank you on behalf of missionaries who are already beginning to feel, and will feel even more in the future, your renewed concern for them as companions. Bless you.